Hello, and welcome to our Aligning Life and Wealth series, where we're making money mean more by aligning it with aspects of life that matter most. We're interviewing what I like to call our life experts, from diet and health to home security. Their services have a great impact on the lives of many. I'm Michael Conway, President and CEO of Conway Wealth, and today I'm excited to introduce to you Renee Fitton. Renee has a Master of Science, is a registered dietitian, and current Director of Education at Prolon. Okay, here we go. We'll kick it off. Renee, great to have you today. Looking forward to our conversation. Good to see you.
So good to see you. Thank you for having me. I think we're going to cover a topic that is pretty new for a lot of listeners. So I'm excited to get people some new info.
Yeah, good deal. I have used the product before, so we'll jump in. I think this one might be a little longer than some of our interviews in the past because there is a lot to cover and a lot of really great material. So let's start with the headline. Tell us a little bit about L-Nutra and Prolon and what you do there.
Absolutely. So L-Nutra is a longevity company and specifically focusing on nutrition to support longevity. It is a company that is backed by nearly 3 decades of science. There's now over 40 clinical trials behind everything that is produced from this parent organization. One of the children of the parent organization, known as L-Nutra, that is typically most familiar to people is Prolon. Prolon is known for the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. So yes, it is possible to get all of the incredible benefits of 5-day water-only fasting while eating. And that is really what all of this science has gone into figuring out. And so my role within these companies is as the director of education. I am a longevity dietitian. So my master's degree is specifically in healthy aging nutrition. And I studied under Dr. Walter Longo, one of the leading, if not the leading longevity researcher in the world today. So very, very lucky that USC created that program for dietitians to really sink their teeth into this space. And so today I am considered a longevity dietitian, and I'm very proud to be part of the L-Nutra family.
Yeah, that's great. How did you end up making a career out of this nutrition and health and all of it?
It's a good question. So I started originally thinking I was a science nerd. I loved biology. I knew that was going to be my space. And so, I think intuitively I thought, oh, I'll be a doctor. That's got to be the most obvious thing. And so that's where my early career started. I was pre-med and I ended up doing some really cool things. I volunteered in an emergency room. I went to Nicaragua and South Africa and did some missions out there and really was just trying to absorb as much as I could in this world of healthcare. But one of the things that I quickly noticed, and this was especially poignant when I was in Nicaragua, because we're carrying giant backpacks of prescription medication. And while there is absolutely a place and a need for those things in some cases, when you're going into remote areas where they're not going to have access to these things again, if it is a chronic condition, then medications aren't going to be very helpful for them. And you really do need to look into lifestyle changes. And so then I really started to explore this space of lifestyle changes and some of the impacts that it could make, and found nutrition and really started to recognize what an incredible, not just preventative, but even curative impact nutrition can have on people. And I never turned back. Once I bit into the apple, it was game over. And I really knew that this was the path for me. And so became a registered dietitian. It's a bit of a trek to get there. They don't make it easy. You have to do 1,200 hours of unpaid internships. You have to get a 2-year master's degree. You have to do a credentialing exam and a handful of other things. And then finally you get to be a dietitian. And that was over 5 years ago now.
There you go. But it is such a doctors today are so busy, and I don't know how much time they spend in medical school studying diet, but from what I understand, it's very little, and they have to jump from one patient to the next very quickly, so there isn't a lot of time spent on this sort of thing, so it's a big deal. What is a fasting, mimicking diet like Prolon, and how does it work?
So, the fasting mimicking diet is essentially a 5-day program where you get everything that you need in 5 individual days boxes. It is real food. So, I think a lot of the time when people think of fasting mimicking, they think they're going to get a bunch of teas or broth or something like that. This is a nut based breakfast bar. You're getting whole soups, you're getting crackers, you're getting olives, you're getting supplements. You are, yes, getting teas as well.
You're
But
not necessarily getting full per se.
well, yeah, it's well, it depends on the person too, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
the first day is 1,100 calories. So for some people, that's like pretty
Yeah,
darn
yeah.
close to their regular day. Then, yes, you drop down to about 750 calories for the remaining days. So it is still calorie restricted. But the beauty of this program is that it is far more than calorie restriction. If you just cut your calories, you wouldn't get the benefits of the fasting mimicking diet. It is based on specific nutrients and in specific amounts so that your body isn't triggered into what it typically is triggered in, which is a growth phase.
I just talked to somebody the other day, and they were trying to fast. They'd never heard of Prolon, and they were trying to fast without anything, without any food, and so it is a misconception. So the way this you have worked, the company has worked the formula. How can you fast and eat food at the same time?
So
Talk about that.
yeah, no, I mean, it really it sounds too good to be true. It sounds impossible, truly. And that's because what we're considering is our dictionary definition of fasting, which is that either you eat food or you don't eat food. And that's really, I mean, it makes sense that that's kind of our
Sure,
instinctual definition of fasting.
sure.
But it turns out that at the cellular level, our cells aren't reading that same dictionary. They have their own definition of fasting. And it's based off of essentially the way I like to think about it is that our cells have alarm bells that are looking for food to be present. And when food is present, the alarm bells will sound. But those alarm bells are actually only looking for very specific nutrients and in very specific amounts. So if you give the right type of nutrients in low enough amount, you actually live under the radar or under the sensor of those alarm bells. And so that's really what a lot of the very early science went into uncovering is what are the triggers to these alarms on the cellular surface. And just for any of the science nerds out there that want to know the definition or the true term for these, they are called nutrient sensing pathways. So that's what is on the cell's surface that is looking for those nutrients, but is quite selective in which nutrients those are. So the Prolon 5-day fasting mimicking diet is by design very low in protein because protein is one of the biggest triggers of these nutrient sensing pathways and also very low in simple sugars. But then we get really, complex into what kinds and what types and how much. So there is, it is a relatively balanced program, but very low protein, very low in simple sugars.
So, how would you describe the physical? What are the main benefits of doing this? You come out on the other side, you finally get to eat on day 6, and we'll talk about that because I've done the fast and made the mistake of coming out on the other side and then going out to a diner for breakfast, and that's not the way to go. But talk to us about the physical benefits of what happens to the body during this.
So there are a lot. And let me just say there's 42 clinical trials now. So I'm just going to pull the ones that we are legally allowed to make claims around.
Mhm.
And two are some of the most popular and commonly wanted benefits here. So one of the biggest one is biological age. And so we have the age that, is on our passport, or we have the age that our cells are actually behaving, and that is biological age. So you can imagine that really the number that we want low here is our biological age, because that's one that we can actually modulate to be either higher or lower than our true age. Prolon has been able to show that with just 3 cycles, that is 5 days a month for 3 months in a row, the biological age of the individual is dropped on an average of 2.5 years. This is, in the world of longevity science, unheard of, to get with just 15 days of intervention, nutrition intervention, to be able to achieve 2.5 years of biological age coming back onto your clock. Pretty
Sure.
impressive stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's probably that's one of my favorites. Of course, a lot of the reasons why people will come to fasting mimicking in the first place is going to be weight loss, which is great. And yes, there is immediate and rapid weight loss that occurs with the fasting mimicking diet. But what is most important is that it is fat focused weight loss. So clinically shown multiple times now, doing DEXA scans that look at body composition to preserve and protect our muscle. And we know how important muscle is, not just because we want to look great and strong, but also because it's so important for our health, for our longevity, for our immunity. I mean, muscle plays a really big part across our body and across our processes at the cellular level even. So we want to protect that muscle. And so many diets today, when we lose weight, we're actually losing muscle. And even, I mean, I'll pick on the Ozempics and the GLP-1s of the world, but we're seeing, yes, fast weight loss, but 40% of that weight loss is muscle. And so it is so critical, especially today, that when we are talking about weight loss, we're not just talking about the number on the scale, we're talking about your body composition. And so that's really a really great part of the fasting mimicking diet, is that you get that weight loss, but you're getting the right kind. Not to mention that we've got studies on visceral fat, which is the stuff around your organs, the most dangerous. It's really targeted to your trunk region or your belly fat. So all of those things kind of come together for a perfect storm of the right kind of weight loss.
Gotcha. The number of times you should do this in a given year, obviously people should consult with their doctors on any questions about any of this stuff. But is it correct that you should do it fewer times a year as you get older? Is that correct? Or yeah.
So I'm going to say yes and no. So I'm going to say that for pretty much everybody, the recommendation is that you do this 3 times a year. Ideally, so the introductory protocol is you do it once a month for 3 months if you're a generally healthy person. And then you would transition to what we consider maintenance, which is every quarter or so doing 1 box. And so about 15 days a year, but each of those 5 days separated by 3 to 4 months. Now, once we hit the age of 65, we add like kind of this yellow flag where we say, make sure that you speak to your physician, you make sure that you have healthy muscle stores, that on the remaining days that you're not doing the 5-day fasting mimicking diet, that you're getting adequate protein and that you're doing muscle building exercise. If you are not in that place where you are muscle wasting, you are on, a lot of medications, then we would actually shift you over to something called L-Nutra Health, where there is doctor supervision, there's dietitian supervision, and there's just additional support to make sure that you're doing this in the right way. If you have prediabetes or diabetes, for example, we'd also shift you over here. Here you might find yourself, believe it or not, doing more cycles. So you are doing it, anywhere from 4 to 6 times in a row as your intro, and then kind of figuring out how frequently you're doing it after. So that's why I say yes and no. For some people who are really, really healthy and they're really just looking to hyper optimize, maybe they only need to do this twice a year.
Gotcha.
But for example, I still do it 3 times a year.
Okay. Are there certain conditions that people should avoid doing this?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So anybody with any late stage, like heart failure, it's serious kidney disease, things like that, definitely speak to your physician.
Sure.
But speak to your physician, because there's also a lot of opportunity for fasting mimicking diet to be possibly helpful. And I'm going to take off my Prolon and L-Nutra hat, and I'm going to put on my hat supporting just fasting mimicking diets in general as a science, and just mention that in those 40 plus clinical trials, A lot of those are in oncology. Some of them are in autoimmune health. So we're talking, we have studies in multiple sclerosis, in IBD, even Alzheimer's. And so these are all early studies, keep in mind. So we have to be
Sure.
very careful what we say here, but there's a lot of opportunity for fasting mimicking to be helpful um, in those realms as well. So if any of that feels like it might apply, I would urge you just go sink your teeth into the literature, and see if bring it to your physician and say, look, this is what I've been seeing, and I'd be curious to see if this works for me. So yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Is there a difference? I have so many questions to get to. So it's good stuff. Is there a difference between fasting and the word ketosis?
Yes. Great
Okay.
question. Ooh, I love this question. Okay, so when we are in a fasted state, our body enters into ketosis. Yes. What is, maybe just for everybody who may not be familiar with ketosis, what is ketosis?
Yeah.
Our body really loves to burn sugar for fuel. It is our go-to fuel source. And if it's present, it will use that. But over time, if you don't eat or you don't eat sugar, your body will run out and it will have to look for something else. And the something else is fat. And so it'll actually use the fat in your body as a fuel source, and it'll turn that into ketones. And that's why we call it ketosis, because your body is using ketones for fuel. So it can also happen. So yes, it happens in fasting because we have nothing. And so our body has to go to fat for fuel. But it can also happen when we're on a very low carb diet. So on a very low carb diet, your body will have to use that fat for fuel and it will turn on ketosis. But what you are still doing on a ketogenic diet is eating protein, right? Because usually what you're eating is fat and protein on a ketogenic diet.
Sure.
Now, one of those things I kind of briefly touched on it earlier on, but that our cells are looking for, those nutrient sensing pathways are looking for, is protein. And so on a ketogenic diet, you are still going to be eating protein, and therefore your cells are never going to be in a true fasted state. So while the ketogenic diet has really great merit in some cases, especially for blood sugar management. We're seeing it now being used more frequently, again, in oncology spaces because you want to reduce the amount of sugar and glucose consumption and utilization. It is not going to allow your body to go in a true fasted state because you're still giving your body too much protein.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Um, Here's one that for me, I think the answer would be no, because there's not much to burn. Is it safe to exercise while on a fasting mimicking diet?
I've been asked this question more and more frequently, I think just because we are now really appreciating the benefits of exercise,
Sure.
and specifically weight training, right? Now, exercise at a very high level should be avoided during the fasting mimicking diet. But
Yes.
it is recommended to still have some movement and some exercise during the fasting mimicking diet because your body is doing a lot of work. It's doing a lot of cleanup during this time. And it's that movement actually allows your body to do a lot of the flushing and cleaning. So
Okay.
I still recommend walking, stretching, light yoga, things like that. If generally, like if you're really breaking a sweat, you've gone too far. But if you're not, then great.
Gotcha. So you're not hitting the treadmill for 45 minutes or pumping iron and getting exhausted. I had asked one of your teammates a question because you talk about weight training. So I've done some lifting and put on some muscle, and I was concerned that if I did the diet, or the Prolon fast rather, that that would be a problem and I'd give up the gains. But I guess that's not the case.
No, not at all. And in fact, this has been studied time and time again. We even did a study that was just specifically looking at men doing the fasting mimicking diet and their strength, not just the amount of muscle, but their strength. And it showed that it was maintained. And then of course, in time and time again, we've shown through these DEXA analysis, which is the gold standard way to measure your body composition, that muscle is being maintained throughout this protocol. So, I think understandably, there's a lot of fear on that, especially because, I'm sure listeners have heard of Peter Attia and some of like the big names in fasting, even big proponents of fasting who have since kind of pulled back a little bit
Yeah,
on their belief of fasting because of the muscle loss and that they were seeing with water only fasting. And
sure.
that's another reason why the fasting mimicking diet is so incredible, because not only are you getting the benefits of the water only fasting, you're taking away some of the downsides of the water only fasting, like some of the safety concerns. Obviously, it's a lot easier, but namely the muscle protection.
Gotcha. Can you drink caffeine? Can you drink your coffee in the morning and tea or
Yes, yes. So you can, but make sure that it is black.
yes.
We do ask that for those who feel comfortable and able, try and cut out coffee for these 5 days. It is
Oh,
really going to.
now you're pushing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like maybe once we're on level 3 and like you're
Yeah,
feeling super comfortable, you've done it a few times. So, it's gonna be for the right person at the right time. But it's a nice challenge. And the other thing that we want to be cautious of is that there are some studies, and they are, generally mice studies that have shown that really, really, really high, and I'm talking very high amounts of caffeine in these mice models did activate the nutrient sensing pathways. So, because we haven't really done that research in humans, we're not 100% sure where we lie. It could be less coffee, more coffee that might have that impact. So, we recommend that just to be safe, to keep it under 140 milligrams of caffeine a day, which is about 2 cups of coffee.
yeah, that's great.
And is it
Any
livable?
It's livable. It's absolutely livable. That's what I usually drink, 1.5 to 2 cups at the most, so I'm good there. So I accept your answer. Um, any side effects from the fasting mimicking diet? And, let's go back to my diner example. How do I transition back to regular eating?
Great questions. So, side effects, I mean, so this has been consistently studied for safety trials and every time shown to have no significant adverse impact. Now, I won't lie to everybody and say that it is a complete breeze and that you will feel incredible every day. That's probably not going to be the case. You might have one or two moments where you have a light headache, where you feel lightheaded, where you feel a little hungry. Those are generally, I noticed that mostly on day 2 and or day 3, where coming around day 4 and 5, you start feeling like we call it keto euphoria, because you really just start feeling so clear and alert and very limited hunger. But yes, there are some challenges, and everybody's a little different on what or how they might experience that. Now, to your second question on the transition day or on day 6, what to do. Um, I also have made the mistake of doing a diner style reintroduction where I had a giant burger from my favorite burger place. I could not have regretted that more. You really do want to transition slowly into your reintroduction of food. So ideally, you want to remain plant-based. We've over the course of the 5 days, it's a fully plant-based protocol. And so remaining plant-based at least just on that first day. And if you are really craving some animal protein, then stick to something really lean, like a lean chicken breast or a piece of fish. That's going to be, or like maybe an egg. Stuff like that would be your best bet for that first day.
Gotcha.
Other things to be mindful of is don't go heavy on added sugars, and also limit alcohol. One other thing that people do like to do is to gradually transition back to solid food. So maybe you start your morning with a smoothie, like a green smoothie. Then you transition for lunch to like a more hearty, like chili, hearty soup type thing. You trust me, I know you'll have done soups for the last few days, but you'll be surprised. You might actually be very happy to have it again come day
Yeah,
6.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then for dinner, that's where you do your more hearty meal, and you kind of just evolved your way through that.
Gotcha. Can you talk I think we touched on this a little bit before, but I wanna make sure to go back to it. The effects on cellular repair and regeneration that happens during and I guess in particular when you're finished with burning the excess coal in your body or however I should be phrasing it, right? You're burning out all the old stuff.
Yeah. Oh God, this is a big topic. We could talk about this for days. But one important thing to note here is that when we are in a prolonged fast, and it is important that we recognize that I qualified it as a prolonged fast. These are fasts that are over 2 days long. You are able to activate something called autophagy. It is essentially the word literally means self-eating. It is our body's ability to go in and eat the junk that has accumulated over time and get rid of it. So I like to think about it like an internal vacuum cleaner for ourselves, an internal doctor for ourselves. That is triggered by something called hermetic stress or positive stress on the body. You really only are able to trigger this process with water only fasting and now fasting mimicking. There is also now some research coming out on really, really high amounts of exercise being able to start to activate this autophagy as well, but it is very difficult to turn on. And in fact, even short term fasts will not turn this on. So, your 16-hour fast that you do every day, unfortunately, is not tapping into this deep cellular cleanup. And so, we always want to try and fit in periodically, maybe those 3 times a year, a little like spring cleaning to just get rid of the accumulation of junk that occurs.
When we did our prep call for this interview, I told you I was going to a French Caribbean island, and so we're going in a week and a half or so, and you can imagine the pastries and the butter, and so I'll be doing one when I return from my trip for sure. Um,
Absolutely. It truly is a great reset. And whenever you can fit it in, right? You're certainly not going to do it when you're on the island, but
no,
when you come back is the perfect time to fit it in.
yeah.
And you want to be able to enjoy those moments, right? You don't want to feel like when you're on the beach, with your drink in your hand, that you are doing something wrong or that you're not going to be able to come back from this. That is the beauty of the Prolon 5-day kit, is that you only have to do it 3 times a year, and it can reverse a lot of some of those indulgences that we honestly deserve throughout the year.
Yeah, the way I think about it and the way I've always talked to people about it is we all need an off ramp. And so I like to eat well during the week and then Friday night have a beer and a burger or some pizza, right? Because if you just can't stay at where it's just pristine, everything you put in your mouth is spinach and kale. It's just not a thing. Um,
Exactly.
Does this impact hormones, like insulin or cortisol? Does it affect those things?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, our body is a beautiful machine of interwoven pathways. It's honestly a mess of pathways. There's so much going on. And when you make a change as significant as fasting, a lot of other things like kind of cascade. So absolutely. I mean, even just the moment that you start fasting, your body responds with what we call counter regulatory hormones. So a lot of things will change. And those counter regulatory hormones cause a cascade of other events. Some of the hormones that we see that will increase during the fast might seem like ones that you don't want to increase. Things like adrenaline and cortisol and some of these stress hormones will increase a little bit. The nice thing about fasting mimicking is because when we add the nutrition and the food, we're able to kind of temper a little bit that stress response, which is especially for women, a really nice addition to the fast. But But that stress response is also really beneficial. Again, we call it that hormetic stress, that positive stress. So it is still a good thing, and we still want that to happen. Now, in terms of long-term results, there are still limited studies in the world of how this might impact your at the hormonal level, but there's a lot of research being done. Um, for example, a lot of the research right now is in PCOS, where we're seeing a lot of really great benefits in that population. And that is specifically due to some of the impacts on hormone levels. But one thing that I'll just say more generally about fasting and fasting mimicking is that, unlike a drug that is hyper targeted and focused on one little thing, and you have to make sure you take the right drug for the right thing, otherwise all hell could break loose. With fasting, we are letting our body be its own guide and figure out what the heck needs to be fixed and go spend its energy there. When we did a study, it was actually, I think it was in 2017, that was able to show that individuals, if they had one thing that was a little off of a healthy baseline versus individuals that already had that in a healthy baseline, the individuals that were in the unhealthy range of that decreased, but those that were already in the healthy range didn't. And so they weren't going to this unsafe low level. If we think about blood sugar, for example, if you had high blood sugar, your blood sugar would come down to a healthy level, but those that were already at healthy blood sugar stayed there. And those that were already at a healthy blood sugar level, maybe they had high cholesterol. And what we showed there is that their cholesterol went down. And so it's really just kind of letting your body navigate and figure out what the heck is going awry and doing the cleanup work where it needs to, and also having the safeguards to not go too low or too dangerously in any direction either.
I I have a follow-up thought to something you said a minute ago. Um, there's been a lot written about your windows of eating during the day. Fasting, what's it called? Oh, intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
right? So it's to, eat in a 4-hour window, or some people are doing it where they're eating one big meal a day and the rest they're fasting. You thoughts on that? That's not that helpful, or it's a what are your thoughts on that?
So many thoughts. Another topic that we could spend hours on, but let me just try and answer this one quickly. Fasting for extended periods of time on an everyday basis, you are essentially causing this hermetic stress, this positive stress, but you're now doing it every single day. And the longer you fast every day, the more stress you're adding to your body. Now, that done every single day could become problematic. And
Okay.
that is why with the prolonged fasts, these 5-day fasts, we only do them 3 times a year, right? Because too much of a good thing can become a
Sure.
bad thing. And especially when we talk about stress to our body, that can be caused by these prolonged fasts. We recommend to try and limit that. Dr. Walter Longo you will hear him say it time and time again that he really only recommends up to about 14-hour fasts a day. And for generally healthy people that aren't really looking for weight loss, 12 hours is more than enough. And that's
What's
because
the
that window. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. What's the name of his book?
The longevity diet.
Yeah, so I read that a few years ago, started me on this journey with Prolon for sure. Um, talk to us about what you eat personally on a daily basis. What is your diet like, and what foods should we avoid?
So I am a big believer in not avoiding anything. I really try and live in a land of abundance and let myself, if I end up at a steakhouse and there's a beautiful piece of meat in front of me and someone says, "Renee, this is the best steak I've ever had," then I'm absolutely having a bite. But on pretty much every other day, I'm generally plant-based. So I do eat some fish occasionally, but that's usually, I try and stick to up to 2 days a week or so. And then the rest of it, very plant forward. Um, I do fast for generally like 12 to 14 hours a day, depending on the day. Honestly, sometimes it just gets away from me because I'm so
Sure,
busy. But that is just my general fasting window on a day to day. But again, I'm currently, as we speak, I'm on day 2 of my fasting mimicking diet. I try and fit that in 3 times a year. Occasionally I will do 4 times a year if I, you know, end up indulging more than I had planned and at any given time. But that kind of allows me to have these days where I can indulge and enjoy
sure,
my time.
sure. Gotcha. Okay. What's the number one thing people get wrong when it comes to fasting?
Oh, so many things. I think one of the big ones is that bone broth and protein and all of these like amino acid things won't break your fast. And they absolutely will, especially if your goal is this deep cellular fast. If you're just doing an intermittent fast for 16 hours, you're really not going to be able to tap into deep cellular cleanup anyway. And most of the benefits are hypothetically from just switching into ketosis and reducing your calories. So I guess fine, but for a true fast, you really should not be adding those. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest misnomer that I hear most frequently. Um, but there's so many. The
Okay.
world of fasting is vast and filled with misinformation.
There you go. All right. As we come to an end here, what is your number one piece of advice when it comes to overall personal nutrition? And that's a tough one too, because there's all kinds of things. But if you had to pick one or two things that you could tell the audience that you think is so important.
Um, okay. I'm gonna pick one of the big ones is prioritize. So what are you actually going to do? Don't set yourself a list of 100 things that you want to accomplish for your nutrition and aim to do them all at once. Make the list if you have 100 things that you want to
Sure.
do, or maybe 10, make the list of 10 and then go through the list and see the ones that you're most likely to actually do that seem the most easy to bite off. And also the ones that you feel would have the largest impact and kind of do that kind of assessment across the list and then start with that one, the one that's going to have the biggest impact that you're most likely to do. And that would probably be my biggest recommendation because I can make my favorite recommendation, but it might not work for you. And then you'll never do it. So what you don't do is never going to help you. And then the other one that is, again, maybe a misnomer is how much protein people should be having. I think in today's world, we are becoming so highly protein centric. And I'm a believer in consuming outside of obviously the 5 day fasting mimicking window where it's very reduced to consume a healthy amount of protein. But it is not 1 gram per pound. Whoever came up with that, I don't know where they came up with it, but it is an excessive amount of protein that you just don't need. And in fact, if you are consuming that much protein, you are setting yourself up for some problems down the line. Very high amounts of protein can increase one of our nutrient sensing pathways known as IGF-1. High amounts of IGF-1 associated with cancer and other chronic conditions. So just be mindful that, again, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. It applies to so many things, and protein is absolutely
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm glad we stumbled on that point at the end because there's a lot of folks that are saying the 1 gram per, and I've been using protein and I've been wondering, this seems like a lot of protein. So
yeah.
that's a great point for sure.
Yeah,
So
not to mention that your body really only absorbs about like 20 grams per sittings, maybe a little more in some cases, but are overdoing it, you're just honestly kind of wasting your money and you might be putting yourself in a really bad place like it for your
yeah,
health.
yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Renee, fantastic job today. Thank you so much. We're gonna have to have you back because there's a lot more to cover, but thanks for being with us and visiting with us today. So a lot of great insights. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much for having me and don't hesitate to reach out. You can share my contact information in the notes or wherever it ends up. And I'm happy to answer questions afterwards too.
We will do that for sure. Great to visit, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Aligning Life and Wealth series and for the impact you're creating by allowing people to best align their life and wealth through health and nutrition. You can find this video along with the rest of our Aligning Life and Wealth series on our YouTube, LinkedIn, X, and Facebook. Thank you.